the Louisiana Department of Ed 2020 Teacher Leader Summit Virtual Training Series. My name's Sharon. I'm going to be your host moderator for this session. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the chat box, and we will try to address them. And this session is scheduled from 1 to 2:30. I'm going to go ahead and turn everything over to your two presenters for this session. And if you guys need me, just send me a chat.
Much for being here with us today. I am Vicki Condolari, and I'm from the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching. I'm the Vice President of Services, and with me today I have the lovely Lindsay Parker, who is a Senior Program Specialist and also our Assistant Director for Training. So we're here together to share some of our favorite information with you around leveraging virtual learning walks. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started. First up here today and talk a little bit about our objectives. So what is it that we're going to do today? Well, I'm going to tell you, if you've been in our sessions before, you know we have a lot of things to share, and we have some really power-packing goals for our session today. You're going to know the impact of the learning walk process. You know, really dig into, so why is this beneficial? We're going to share with you some information that I think is going to really be intriguing. And then also to understand how to use data gathered during learning walks to determine differentiated support at multiple levels. You know, there's nothing better than getting a bang for your buck. And so this is how we're going to take this tool and really maximize it so that it's worth the time, energy, and effort and gets you what you need, impact for students. And then be able to leverage focused learning walks as a tool for strengthening teacher support and leader impact. So this not only is for strengthening the support that we have for our teachers, but it's for our leaders, whether at the school level or at the district level. So again, another value, another bang for the buck, and that's so important. So some of our norms today, as we get into this, I just want to stop for just a moment and share, because we're in a virtual space. And so we hope that you'll engage with us today. We're going to use the chat feature. We love to learn from you. We're a learning organization. And so part of the fun for us is hearing your thoughts and how you're handling different situations in this new space that we're in, our new reality, so to speak. So I want you to engage today, and any questions you have, please ask them, and we'll make sure that we're watching that box. We're getting better, and we'll make sure that we answer those or attempt to in the best way that we can, or someone else might also have an opportunity to answer. And in addition to that, have your handouts ready. You know, we do have a few handouts. We have what we call our session guide, which has 3 different pages in that we'll be referring to throughout today's session. And then we have a wonderful tool that perhaps you've seen before. It's our second handout, which is our companion tool that NIT put out. That really is something that's going to be, it's so super good, because it helps you in this virtual space that we're entering into, or that we're involved in now. It helps us with some guides and some additional strategies, and it links to our NIT teaching standards. But don't worry, if you're not using that, if you're using our Compass rubric, it also integrates and is a companion document for that as well. So with that, let's talk about how we're going to reach those objectives today, right? So our session agenda. Our session agenda is no worries, we're good. It's about defining learning walks. We're going to define that and really help you to kind of understand the difference between learning walks and maybe some other terms like walkthroughs. Lindsay is going to share with us some great information there to help us discern the difference. And then we're going to get into, so what does that process look like before learning walks? What does it look like in action? We are going on a virtual field trip, and you're going to see a virtual classroom lesson that we would be popping into and actually observing. And then what does it look like after? So you're going to see that after activity of what happens in a learning walk sequence. So then we'll talk about a little simulation. So what does that debrief start to look like? And then define those multiple levels of support, how we take this one opportunity and maximize it. And then we'll make some reflections and some connections. And before we jump in with Lindsay, because she's got the pedal to the metal, going to shoot the car off the launch pad any second. She says, Vicki, hurry up, I got to go. One more thing, just a couple of vocabulary words we wanted to introduce to you today that we might use, and we didn't want to, in this new space we're all in, we want to make sure we're on the same page. So when we talk about synchronous learning, we talk about synchronous, what we mean is that teacher and student interaction is happening in that real time, right? That's synchronous. And then asynchronous, we'll talk a little bit about, which is that kind of when students are on their own, right? When that teacher might not be directly involved with them. So synchronous, like that live, asynchronous, on your own. Okay, Lindsay, let's put the pedal to the metal and let's get after it. Welcome, everybody.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for joining us today. It's good to be with you on this Friday afternoon. It's a beautiful afternoon where I am. But today we're really going to be talking about learning walks, and specifically how we can use learning walks as a catalyst for 3 distinct purposes. So specifically looking at learning walks as a way to reimagine classroom visits and what that looks like for ourselves as leaders and for teachers, to also provide some strengths-based teacher support. And then 3, to use learning walks as a means to define learning for school-wide new learning. Because the first thing that I think about when I think about the term learning walk, I wonder if that's just another name for observation. But I'm here to tell you today, we want to sort of reset your mind as to what we call a learning walk. We want this to be different from a traditional classroom walkthrough. Specifically, as we continue to talk through the next little bit of time, we're going to talk about how a learning walk is exactly what it says it is, that it's about learning not only for the teacher in the classroom, but learning for the leaders who are engaging in that learning walk as well. So when we're going into the classroom, we're often going to go in for a learning walk in collaboration with another leader or several other leaders, so that we're getting that same learning in that same time, so that we can build our learning collaboratively and collectively among the leaders in our school, because we want to see what's working in classrooms for students, whether those are traditional classrooms or virtual spaces. We want to identify trends that we may be seeing across multiple classrooms, so that we can define what we as a team need to learn more about as leaders, and what our teachers in their groups, in their PLCs or clusters, what they also can be learning about as we move forward. These distinct purposes really tie back to our objectives that Vicki was talking about, where we're really going to think about the impact of the learning walks on teams, schools, teachers, and students. And we're going to look at how we can develop specific teacher support based on their individual strengths that we really gather out of that learning walk opportunity. And then we'll use that to define some next steps for the team as a whole.
Excellent. That sounds good, Lindsay. So we're really thinking about how we can use that observation and feedback opportunity to grow ourselves as leaders and to grow our teachers so we grow our kids.
Absolutely. And I think, honestly, Vicki, I think it's more important even in the virtual learning space that we attend to this than maybe it even was in brick and mortar. And learning walks is certainly a process that I advocate for in any classroom setting. But as we talk specifically about the virtual learning space today, because we're going to see a virtual classroom in action, it's really important for us to recognize that we're not just transferring traditional classroom activities to the virtual space, but we're transforming them. And so in that mode, we're really looking at how lessons are delivered, and that might look a little different in a virtual space. Specifically, we want to make sure we're still holding everyone to those high expectations for standard aligned instruction, that we've got that tier 1 curriculum connection. But often in a virtual space, the work that students are doing is hidden from the teacher. Think about it. Even if they're working as we're teaching them in a synchronous environment, that work is not necessarily something the teacher has access to see in a moment's notice. And so we have to start thinking about where we are and how we can intentionally focus on implementing checks for student understanding throughout lessons, where we can be more intentional in ensuring that we know and understand what students understand, and also being more intentional in our focus on ensuring students fully understand tasks, so that when they get in that asynchronous space away from the teacher, they're able to demonstrate success on those tasks that they're engaged in. But honestly, Vicki, this is new to most of us out there, and we're all learning. And I think it's important too that teachers know that, it's not all bad, and that they're doing something right. And so I think that strengths-based approach is just really critical right now, because it feels like it's so different, and we've got so much cognitive demand to lift even a piece of a lesson, that we need to go in as coaches and really help build awareness of what's working for kids, so that we can help teachers elevate those practices to further enhance student achievement. And so with that being said, we're going to dig in and learn a little bit more about what we mean when we talk about a learning walk, just so that we're all on the same page with vocabulary today. And then we're going to dig in a little deeper as we move through this session with some work specifically in the classroom. So like I said before, learning walks are often completed collaboratively. Multiple members of a leadership team will go in at one time, whether that's a traditional space or a virtual space, and we're really looking for, in that moment, the impact of instruction on student learning. See, that's the thing. We're not just looking at the teacher, but we want to know what's bringing students to an understanding of those tasks and objectives for that particular activity. Learning walks are about looking for strengths. What's working? Not necessarily just finding gaps in delivery. This is not an I gotcha situation. This is an opportunity for collaborative and collective growth for all of us. We're really going to those classrooms to validate transfer of practice, so that we can help teachers see what's working in the virtual space so they can replicate it. Awareness is critical, and this is important. They need us to help them see what's strong in the practice and what's contributing to student success. Ultimately, learning walks are just as valuable for the leadership team as they are for the teacher in the classroom, because learning walks at their core are a strategy to build capacity of the leadership team. So what are we seeing that's working that we can help bring to more teachers throughout a building? And what are we seeing that we all need to learn more about so we can grow collectively as a school? So now we're going to take a little closer look at the components of learning walks.
And Lindsay, just, it's so interesting that we're digging into this now, and how important, we always were looking for student engagement. And I think about that and what you just said, because you talked about, it's about looking for those strengths. And to look for the strengths, we have to look for the impact. So what is the impact on students? So in a virtual space, it looks a little different, as you alluded to, in that I have to know what to look for with students, right? So those engagement strategies might look a little different. So I just wanted to point that out. I think that's why that new learning for us as leaders, as whether you're at the district or at the school level, is critical, so that we begin to pinpoint those things and help our teachers, like you say, create awareness around those strengths, but also maybe those little next steps that just build on that and help them to engage in that instructional space a little differently.
Absolutely. I agree completely, Vicki. And that's a really great point, in terms of we really want to come together to do what's best and to support teachers in the best ways we can collectively. And so when we talk about the components of learning walks, and this graphic is in your session guide on handout 1, and I did upload that session guide and the companion tool we'll talk about later to the chat box. If you don't have it, you can go ahead and download it now. So when we think about the components of the learning walk, as a leader going into the classroom, I'm really looking to do 3 things. So first, I want to make sure that I'm determining some strengths that I'm going to identify immediately. So for me as a leader conducting a learning walk, I'm literally keeping like a list of like checks. Like I just put like a check on top of my paper, or a plus, and I'm just writing strengths that are happening as I'm engaging in that learning walk, so that we can discuss those and go on to step 2, which is really having that immediate reflective conversation that's focused on student learning. Because I, as a teacher, can do all these wonderful things that look good and great and fabulous, but if students don't get anything out of it, I didn't have any impact. And I might be working myself crazy. So I got to take a step back and say, what is it that the teacher is doing that's positively impacting that student achievement? And so that's really what we're looking at. So as a team going in to conduct the learning walk, we're going to determine those strengths. We're going to have that immediate reflective conversation that's focused on students. And then the third thing that we're going to do is we're going to have a reflective conversation as a group to identify some trends and next steps for the team. So we're identifying strengths. We're having a conversation with the teacher that's telling them what's going on, StrengthBased, what we see that's good. But we're also having that third reflective conversation to think about steps for the team. And, in a virtual environment, this capacity building piece is really huge, right? So this is not a checklist. We're not doing learning walks to check them off the list because someone said I had to go into 10 classrooms this week. Check, 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 right? So what we're really thinking about then is that learning walks are an opportunity to learn, and we're going to define learning for leaders and teachers in our building. When we think about determining strengths immediately, that's happening, like I said, for me in the conversation. The immediate reflective conversation with the people having the learning walk could happen right after we leave the classroom in the hallway or in a safe space a couple of doors down. We might conduct 2 or 3 learning walks before we have that conversation. And then that conversation with the teacher is going to happen as soon as it's appropriate to have that conversation with the teacher, right? So the next opportunity we get to meet with that teacher and have that reflective conversation. Typically that's within a few hours or within the day, possibly around their schedule and what works for them best. But then we're also going to have that conversation about what we need to learn as leaders, because y'all, that's super important. In this virtual environment, we also have to develop our capacity as leaders, not just in what quality instruction looks like in the virtual space, but really also in how we are observing that instruction in virtual space and how we are providing that feedback. I prefer to provide feedback face-to-face always. It's just my personal preference. So I typically am going to schedule some sort of a Zoom call because I just appreciate getting to see the think time on the teacher's face or getting to see their reactions and hearing what they're saying. But we do whatever we can given the context of what's happening. It's just really important that we intentionally focus on building capacity with intention, being intentional about focusing on what's going well and where we might need to prioritize new learning, not just for the teachers, but also for ourselves as leaders, because we're new to this space too, and we need a little grace as well.
Yeah, awesome. Such a good explanation too, Lindsay. Thank you for that. We're getting some great little chats and going through each of these pieces. And so I know, it's really important for us to keep the main thing, right? And so as we think about it, here's one of my most favorite quotes from Hattie. I have a little crush on Hattie and his work, a little mini crush. But I'll just read it to you in case some of you are maybe, I know we multitask. I'll just read out loud if you don't mind just for a moment. It is essentially a matter of asking yourself how the teaching process influences the learning process and searching for evidence to make the connection between these two processes visible. The most important thing is to succeed and not just collecting the data, but also reflecting on and interpreting the data with your next lesson in mind. I love that because, even as we're speaking about our new reality, so to speak, of distance learning and the way in which we're engaging with our kids in a little unknown time here that we're in, it's going to be even more invisible sometimes to see that connection. So the more that we can hone our skills, the more that we can work together cooperatively to figure out what that looks like, the better. And we have some tools at NIT, like I mentioned before, that are very helpful in this process. And so let's dig into one of those tools right now, because it's going to be important for us to have a little heads up about what we can use in this space that we're in to grow ourselves. Now, Lindsay has put those documents in the chat box for you so that you can easily access them, if you haven't had that opportunity just yet. So we just wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. So handout 2, for those of you who have downloaded things already, or maybe that you pulled up on your screen, is the NIT Companion Tool. And again, this isn't just for the NIT teaching standards. Of course, it's lovely and is laid out in that way, but it's also for any tool that you're using, like the Compass rubric. It'll align back to this and it'll be helpful for you. So as you look at this, I want to just talk briefly, just for a moment, about how it's organized. If this is your first chance to see it, it's organized around 3 domains: the domain of instruction, planning, and environment. And within those domains, it's organized by the different components or indicators. And to the left of the document, if you're opening it up, it shows the indicator itself at the exemplary or highest level, far left. And then in the middle column, it shows what some of those virtual learning strategies might be, because this is a companion tool. Excuse me, I felt like a sneeze was coming. This is a companion tool to go along with whatever set of teaching standards you might be using. So in the moment, and in the middle, you have there those virtual strategies that really help us start thinking. So what would engagement look like in that virtual space? And then to the right, it has additional synchronous, are those live, real teaching and learning experiences there between teacher and student, some additional synchronous considerations there. And so as you look at this, I'd like for you, if you don't mind, if you have the document open, to look at page 2 just briefly. Page 2, we're going to be in the instruction domain of this particular tool. And I want you just to start looking within the instruction domain and see what you're noticing. See what you notice. I want you really to think about something maybe that strikes you, or something maybe that you think might be helpful. As you just peruse this, I'm going to be quiet for just a moment. And I tell Lindsay I hate quiet time because in the classroom there's always noise, but I'm going to give you a little moment. And then if you'd like to chat, maybe something you notice in that middle column or in that far right column about something maybe that strikes you, maybe you'll note it for us in the chat box with maybe how it's helpful. I'll be quiet for a minute.
Yeah, I know one of the things that I notice is that when I look at this tool, I see those best instructional practices listed as those descriptors. But what's really interesting to me is that in the virtual learning strategies and the synchronous considerations column, I see like concrete examples of tools or structures, strategies that I might use to get at those best instructional practices, but in a virtual learning space, because that is usually my question, right? Because I'm used to engaging with these practices in a brick and mortar classroom, but this gives me ideas for what I might do in a virtual classroom, and I really appreciate that.
Lindsay, that's what helps me to begin to visualize and think about. So I could think about this as a teacher. I see myself using this tool as I plan, like you say, for that transforming of that lesson, that guidebook lesson, or that Eureka lesson, or whatever curricula I'm using. I really could think about how I could plan or insert or think about it a little differently, the how piece a little differently in that virtual space. So it's really a key idea there, is that this could be used for planning or reflecting, for leaders or for teachers who are face-to-face with kids or in a virtual space with students. So any thoughts? Well, I'm seeing, oh, great, some stuff's coming in. I see Shakara, I apologize. James, I don't have my glasses. Communication addresses all learning styles with every lesson. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for noticing that.
I think that communication is really important. And as I kind of look through here and kind of thinking about the comment there's several places where it talks about clearly labeled documents and clearly communicated objectives, clearly labeled like modeling. I think that's even more important in a virtual space because we don't have that opportunity necessarily to check for understanding quite the same way we would in brick and mortar. So I think it's important to even be more clear in our communication.
Absolutely. You have to signpost and be even clearer. And I see Noelle, I love you, is talking about, it works both ways, that it really looks for people doing the learning walk, gives them a tool for feedback, and suggestions. And that's something we need right now in this space. Oh, and Tessie, my Tessie. I see Tessie's thinking about, the strategies, how they help to define the indicators a little bit better, especially in this new space. And it allows everybody to have that thoughtful kind of look at instruction when it's in the virtual learning environment. Mm-hmm.
And Vicki, I think that's really important as we kind of begin to shift gears a little bit, that what we're saying is that, the virtual learning space is new to a lot of us as educators, and we're still figuring out what that might look and sound like in practice. And so this tool is a great way to get some ideas for what it might look like in the virtual learning space. But I think it's really important that we see some examples of what that looks like in action as well. So,
I'm getting excited. Lindsay transitioning, and other folks are saying, "Wow, this is similar to the rubric." Yeah, you're right. It is. It's similar to follow that order, that sequential order. And Lindsay's gearing up. You can tell she's pushing the gas. She said, "Let's go." So as we think about that, let's go. We're going to go and we're going to start utilizing the tool now, and think about how this can help us when we're looking at a lesson, when we're doing a learning walk. So Lindsay, take us away and talk a little bit about the lesson that we're going to be seeing.
Absolutely. So I think that one of the things that's important about learning walks, and really anytime we're in classrooms as leaders, is that we're really focused on trying to give critical feedback to teachers that is within the scope of the expectations of the curriculum and the standards. And so oftentimes it's important for us to have some context oftentimes it's important to have some context for what's happening in the classroom so that we make sure that we know what we're seeing, because we're not always in there for a full lesson when we talk about a learning walk. It's often more like a 15 to 20 minute session. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a leader in this school, and I'm going to tell you sort of what I learned from the teacher prior to going into the learning walk. So we looked at her plans and we talked this thing through on Zoom because it's full virtual. But here's some things that we heard. So one, this is going to be a third grade ELA lesson that we're going to view today. And particularly where they are in the context is that they are nearing the end of their Cajun Folktales unit. So they're at the extension task. And specifically, students have written a first draft of this narrative writing already. So the extension task is a narrative writing. You can see that on your screen. It's a trickster tale that they write as a result of that unit. And so kids have gone in and they've written this draft, and she's gone on to the next lesson where they revise for some key information, and they're doing pretty well with revisions for structure. Students mostly have a problem and a solution. There's some event sequence that makes sense, but it's still difficult to understand because students in this classroom don't fully understand how to use dialogue with proper punctuation. They know they're supposed to have dialogue in their narrative writing. They know that's one of the things on the list. But what they don't understand really, and you can see that in the extension task, that they use dialogue and descriptions of actions, thoughts, and feelings to develop experiences. But it's just all in one paragraph. It's just like all these people talking together and mixing together. And she's like, something has to give. I can't just tell them to go in and edit because they're not going to know how to edit for that. So the first thing that she did, this teacher, Miss Looper, is that she went in and she pulled the standards, the writing and language standards around dialogue and punctuation. And she also pulled that exemplar for the extension task from that guidebook lesson so that she can see really what the expectations for students were in this lesson. And it confirmed her suspicions. You can see clearly in the standards that students are required in third grade to use the dialogue, much like is stated in the task directions, but also to punctuate those accurately. And then when we see in the exemplar is that use of separating paragraphs for speakers, which is really important to understanding of writing, but her students aren't doing that. And so one of the things that we've been talking about in PLCs is how do we know when and where and how to sort of front load and fill those learning gaps on sort of an everyday basis. So what she sees is, this is a problem my students are having. They have to get this in order to be successful with the task. I need to stop for just a minute and have a little mini lesson on how we separate paragraphs based on new speakers so that students can adequately edit their extension task and be successful at the end of this lesson sequence. So what we're going to see in the lesson is actually this mini lesson. The mini lesson lasts 18 minutes in total. We cut a little bit of it out for you. You're going to see 2 separate 5-minute clips, but you really are going to see her front loading, filling this learning gap by engaging students in a mini lesson. She's going to use a mentor text to reteach some expectations so that students have the learning that they need to be successful in that ultimate guidebook lesson.
So Lindsay, as Lindsay pulls up actually the video that you're going to see, remember this is a focus for this particular school, right? And something that's always on the mind, especially here in Louisiana with Tier 1 curricula and how we want to keep that at the focus. But remember, a learning walk is also just going in and seeing what's happening and coming out and tying it to those needs, as Lindsay said. And in this school, we're really watching that with the gaps that have been created from unfinished learning and those types of things, how that can be brought into a Tier 1 lesson, right? And added in where that gap is there. So you have handout 3 that we'd like for you to use with this to capture maybe some notes. It's a note catcher. And we're looking for a couple of questions that are there. Grabbing mine at the same time. So you see there that there's some places for you to make some notes around how did students respond to the teacher's instructional strategies, what kinds of student work was produced during the lesson, and did the lesson align to rigor and depth. Just some things we'll talk about after, but you're just going in, just observing what's happening in that lesson. And one other little tidbit is that it is a virtual lesson, so you're going to see it, but some of the images had to be blurred of students, but you can hear the students and you can listen to what the students are engaging around. So 18-minute lesson, we're just going in for a little snippet of it, 10, 15 minutes. Lindsay, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Absolutely. So this first piece will be about 5 minutes, and then we'll stop and talk about some of those questions, and we'll take you back in for the next job. Let's go.
So when we're reading and we're talking about characters talking, we may see things like he laughed, he screamed, or she said, and then we see the quotation, right, that the author has used to show what characters are saying. Today, we're going to go further than that. We've already talked about how to use quotation marks, and we've talked about how to use dialogue tags. Today, we're going to talk about what do authors do to show you that different people are speaking, okay? So I do want you to mute yourself. So make sure you have muted yourself, and I will give you a chance to answer questions in just a second, but we're going to go to the dunderheads for a little while. Now, I think everyone on this call has heard the read aloud. Some of you may have even watched the read aloud that I did on Google Classroom. It's there today. So we're going to talk about how Paul Fleischman actually uses a technique in his writing, and most writers do this, to show you when we change speakers. Because a lot of times when characters are talking, it's more than one person, right? They're having a conversation. Give me a thumbs up if you can see this page. Thumbs up if you can see this page. Awesome. Okay. So this is an actual page out of the Dunderheads. And I chose this page for a reason. Who thinks they know why I chose this page?
Because every time a new speaker speaks, it's like they put a new paragraph. Like this
Okay, and I know why you are picking up on that. But I chose this because there's a lot of dialogue on this page, right? I want you to think about, when does the speaker change? Okay, when does the speaker change? Because there are 3 different people talking here. We'll get caught for sure. Let's try tomorrow. Junkyard needs that cat tomorrow, I said. We're going in tonight. I turned to Spider. see if anyone's in the back.
So we're stopping the video for a moment, guys. What you're seeing on the screen right now is what the students are seeing. So you can't see the teachers' faces right now, the teacher's face or the student's face. You're just hearing. And a lot of times in virtual, that's what you'll see on the, on the screen when you go in. You'll just see the PowerPoint or the text. So that's when, and I'm so glad some folks noticed this, that's when that part about the engagement is going to look very different, right? So it's going to look different in a virtual space. So I just wanted to stop for just a moment and clarify that. And I should have front loaded that a little bit better. My apologies for that confusion. It was on me, not given as clear of directions, but it looks like so. It's just the visual, it's the PowerPoint, or it's whatever the teacher is using in that virtual space. So you're hearing the lesson, but you have to look a little different for the engagement, which makes it a little tricky. And I'm just going to take it from here, Lindsay, but maybe just back it up a hair if you could. I don't want him to miss some of what the teacher is saying. I apologize for that, guys. Okay, so we're going to back it up a little bit and then we'll take it. All right, Lindsay, let's try it.
Because every time a new speaker speaks, it's like they put a new paragraph. Like this
Okay, and I'm glad you are picking up on that. But I chose this because there's a lot of dialogue on this page, right? I want you to think about, when does the speaker change? Okay, when does the speaker change? Because there are three different people talking here. We'll get caught for sure. Let's try tomorrow. Junkyard needs that cat tomorrow, I said. We're going in tonight. I turned to Spider. See if anyone's in the backyard. So, does anybody know when the speakers change here? I want you to think about that. We have three speakers on the board. When do you think the speakers change?
The book doesn't tell you when the speakers change, but you can pretty much guess when the speakers change, because we'll get caught for sure. Let's try tomorrow. Wouldn't be what the narrator would have said, but Junkyard needs the cat tomorrow. We're going in tonight is kind of what the narrator would have said.
Okay, so you identified this section right here, the whole section about we're going in tonight, as the narrator's voice, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I put that in pink right there. And you said these speakers are different. Are there two speakers here or just one?
Two.
How do you know?
Because there's two different sets of quotation marks.
Two different sets of quotation marks. Something to add? I see you're real excited about it.
If it's not the same person speaking, you have to start a new paragraph.
Okay, look at this, guys. Paul Fleischman started a new paragraph every single time the speaker changed. So right here, do you see I have this space? He indented. This is speaker one. We'll get caught for sure. But look, if it was the same speaker, it would be back over here near my margin. He indented again. That means that's the second speaker. And then our narrator starts speaking. This is the third speaker. So every single time a new character speaks, what does the author do?
Indent.
Indents, starts a new line.
Okay, some good things are coming through on the chat box right now. And one of the things that some folks were noticing is the use of questions, how she's using her questions and listening to her students as they're looking at the text, right, and engaging. In some platforms, you'll even see the chat box like we have today, and the teacher's actually using the chat feature to ask the questions and have students respond. So I think that you're seeing that engagement piece we talked about can be look a little different and be a little tricky. Let's see. Lindsay, did you have any additional pieces that you were noticing there that maybe you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think it's really important, as we were kind of having the conversation in the chat, about how even though, because, you know, sometimes being grammar lessons, I'm iffy about it, but even though, you know, it's a student need and she needs to be here and it's really important, but ELA is my field. So I think it's really important that she, it's not just about telling them, just indent. It's getting them to see the why behind what it is they're doing and why it's important for them to start a new paragraph with each speaker. And she's getting them to think through the process of what that means and why that's important. And so you really can see a lot of thinking happening in this lesson around this language skill. And I think she's really getting at some depth. And I think that part of the reason she does that is because of the high quality questions she's using, like you guys are saying. And also, you know, giving the students a minute. There's some wait time in there. She pauses periodically and lets them think. And she's really using that exemplar text to deepen understanding. And I just like the depth that we're able to see in this.
Yeah, because of what she chose, right? To bring this little mini lesson into, and she's engaging the students. Some people are noticing those questions again. Why did I choose this page? You know, the depth of the questioning and having kids respond. Very, very powerful. Very powerful. So Lindsay, what you're saying is this was a needed skill in order to build on for that bigger standard. And she's bringing it to them in a little nugget kind of a lesson, but she's using some depth in terms of the things she's selecting and how she's asking questions, right? And some folks are noticing that as well as they're going through. Some things some people are noticing too is sometimes you'll have a highlighting feature or a polling feature where you can also engage students in that space, since it's not like I can see them face to face, which makes that seeing between the teaching and learning, it's a little more difficult to see that engagement, but it's just a different kind of instructional technique. So Lindsay, we're going to see the rest of the lesson, and on the rest of the lesson, some folks might have taken some notes there. Keep taking some things as you're noticing them, but we're going to see the rest of the lesson where she continues to push the idea of what this can look and sound like when they're punctuating or putting the dialogue in their writing.
I am now going to let you guys help me with my writing because I have a problem in my story. Okay, so you guys are going to have to help me fix a paragraph. Think you guys are up for the challenge?
Yes.
Yes.
Thumbs up if you're up for the challenge. Okay, we are going to look at this highlighted paragraph in my story. And you are going to have to help me figure out how do I show different speakers. Okay, so listen to my paragraph. Sunday afternoon, I was playing in my room when Mom called. Hunter, Taylor, come in the living room. There's something on TV that I think we should watch. I slowly walked into the living room and Mom said, the governor is making an announcement about school. What kind of an announcement? I asked. I don't know. Let's watch and see, she responded. Now, right now, I have both speakers in the same paragraph. What do I need to do to revise my writing? Take a look at it, and you're going to have to tell me where we need to make some changes. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to look at my writing and give me some advice. Unmute your microphone and give me some advice.
I think you should change it. I'm sorry. I don't think you should change it. I think it's good.
Okay, now it might be good with what it says, but does it do what our mini lesson was about today?
Oh, no, not really.
Okay, so how can I make it show what we just learned about? Evie, I see you. You're going crazy. I know. Just hold on a second. What do you guys think? How can I change it to reflect our new learning?
I think it can reflect your new learning. Oh, wait, are you saying how it's already good?
No, what do I need to do to show the different speakers?
Show the different speakers. You could maybe darken it, like you said.
Okay, well, think about what our lesson was about. What do authors do to show different speakers are speaking?
They use like, what are they called? I forgot the name.
I'll let you jump in.
I have to start a new paragraph.
I have to start a new paragraph each time my speaker changes. Where do I need to make a new paragraph?
You need to start at what kind of announcement?
Okay, I could start right there because what happened?
Another person started speaking. Oh, you left.
Another person started speaking. Now, mom is speaking all in this section, okay? But right here, our narrator is speaking. What kind of an announcement, I asked. But let's continue reading. I don't know. Let's watch and see. She responded. Is the same person speaking?
No. Yeah.
So what do I need to do?
Click enter and tab.
Where at?
I.
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure to get the quotation marks.
Did I get them? I think I got them. Okay. So
Okay,
in the first section, I have mom talking. The second paragraph, the narrator's talking. And then the third paragraph, mom is talking again. So we changed paragraphs each time our character changed, the speaking changed. Okay. So that is exactly what you are going to do today. You are going to go into your writing and you are going to make sure you're going to go in where characters are speaking because you should have some speaking, and you are going to change paragraphs each time a different character speaks. Okay. And you are going to highlight what you did. You actually have a copy of my document in your assignment today, so you can see the example. Okay. Okay. So before we go and we look at the assignments, I'm going to ask you an exit ticket question. Are you ready? And you're going to respond in the chat. So I'm going to be watching to see what your response is. How do authors show readers that speakers change? How do authors show readers that speakers change? I'm going to give you a little bit of time to type that in the chat. It does not need to be in a complete sentence, but I do need to see a response from everyone. So, last question for you, and you're going to do fist to 5 for me. Are you ready? Fist to 5, 5 being, I've got it, Mrs. Leeper, I can teach it to the class. 1 being, I need some extra help. Okay, I want you to show me how well do you understand this lesson? Okay, now if you just joined, we'll have to chat at the end to get you. Okay, I see some 4s. Show me fist to 5, how well you understand starting the new paragraph each time a new character speaks. Awesome. Awesome job, guys. Thank you very much for paying attention during that lesson.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. I was just chatting with folks who, if you haven't seen, perhaps seen some of the chat that's coming through, really talking about those checks for understanding. Some people are noticing how that she's really after that piece. And some people are noting the lesson flow and the model of how important that is in the virtual space, how it can look a little differently, but how that teacher has to be prepared for that. You're noticing that her communication, if it's not clear, Michelle is saying, if it's not clear, she'll be derailed. Especially some folks are noting when you get to that asynchronous or that on your own, because remember, she's only instructing for about 18 to 20 minutes in this space. It's a more limited space oftentimes than we have in that traditional face-to-face brick and mortar, as Lindsay alluded to earlier, classroom, when we have the opportunity, right? But she has to make her time tight, and there's some sequence and progression that has to be followed so all kids have the opportunity to go forth and do. Lindsay, I know you wanted to add a little bit there as well.
Yeah, I have a couple of little notes. This one kind of came out of the chat in some way. It's buried now. But when I look at that particular piece, I think about who's doing the work, right? So I see the teacher's screen. I know she's clicking on the screen, and I know she's doing a lot of talking, but the students are telling the teacher what to do. She actually wasn't doing the work. She was asking the students the questions that got them to tell her how to do that work, and so that she could assess whether or not they were understanding the content there. And I think that's what's really important. I think sometimes we think that we modeled it. Like in the first video, she did a great job of using the exemplar text to show them a model of what this looks and sounds like. But when we got to that second video and she started asking students questions, there was some confusion. And there were students who didn't fully understand what they needed to be doing. And so it makes me think, what would the impact have been on student learning without this second activity, without that shared writing activity in that Google Doc? Because we would have assumed that those students knew, based on the mentor text model, that the paragraphs needed to be separated by speaker. But when we got to the teacher's writing and we asked the students about that, there was some misunderstanding. So she had the opportunity to clear up those misconceptions, to reteach as she needed to in that moment and provide that clear academic feedback that was very objective focused and standard aligned. But then also, I think it's really interesting that she does that for students in that virtual document. That's the exact type of document that students will use on their own in the asynchronous environment. So they've turned a Google Doc into her and she saw it, and now they have to go in and revise their Google Doc. So she's like, this is my writing in Google Doc. This is how we adjust it in this setting that they're going to use asynchronously. So I just think the clarity and the connection between those activities back to the objective was really critical here.
Yeah, and I think, Lindsay, some people are noting that. I know Tessie was noting that modeling piece is critical, and that release piece, and being very paying a hyper focus kind of almost on the tasks that are going through, and you're bringing in that real time or synchronous portion, so that when they get to the asynchronous, are they on their own, that's already been signposted for them. They've already had that experience. And so as they go deeper in their learning, then they're more able to complete or engage in that learning, because it's still happening, right? It's just happening kind of on their own with some scaffolds, built in. Perhaps they're recording that lesson. Shasta might record it and place it so that kids can access it again and watch again for those kids who need it. So we're still differentiating. I get so excited. We're still differentiating for our students. But again, it's a different kind of engagement piece where we're watching, and we have to pay attention, especially to how students are responding in that synchronous portion.
Absolutely.
Things too, Lindsay, here, just to call out some things about the synchronous are critical in these feedback cycles, and how teachers are needing that even in the asynchronous, some opportunities to engage and support in different ways, perhaps, so that they're still with their students, but just in a different kind of a way.
And I'll kind of tag that on this note. We're really looking at a learning walk in a synchronous environment today, but we can learning walk in an asynchronous environment. We can walk through those same tasks as a student and engage in those tasks and really give feedback about what's strong in the tasks that are provided asynchronously, and what the teacher can better leverage to move students closer to achievement as well. So I just want to make that point, because I think sometimes when we think about learning walks and classroom visits, we're used to that being in the classroom. And in a virtual space, that's a little different. And so a lot of leaders I've spoken with recently have been very specific about those learning walks being in synchronous environments. I think just because it aligns more to what we're used to, but we can certainly apply learning walk processes in an asynchronous environment as well.
Absolutely. I think that's an important note. And some of the work we're doing, around this piece is really looking at what those formal observations will look and sound like as well, because we want to capture the entire lesson series, right? And it doesn't always end when the synchronous ends, right? It'll extend beyond, as Lindsay is pointing out. It could begin and end in the synchronous, but we've got to look for those components and that lesson flow that Tessie spoke about and some others of you, you're really seeing those pieces come alive and how they can look different in that virtual space. So some good catches, guys, good catches. So Lindsay, as we kind of move forward, I know we're going to dig in a little bit deeper. Some people are saying, Michelle's noting that the method and the means may have changed a lot, but the technique resounds the same. It's still the same. We're still looking for student learning, student engagement, and the teacher teaching at the level of the standard or of the curriculum. Okay, so good stuff. Let me catch back up. I got to.
Hold on. Doing so well. I had a little moment. Mouse was on the wrong screen. So I just wanted to take a minute and I want you to think about just this one piece. It kind of takes us back a minute, but sometimes we have to take a step back to continue to move forward. And so I want you to just kind of reflect, and you can add some thoughts to the chat. But what might be the impact of our understanding of this lesson that we saw if we didn't take the time to kind of do a walk through the context of the lesson prior to being in that synchronous space with that teacher?
And you know, Lindsay, as I'm thinking about that question, I'm thinking about the fact that especially with a state like ours that is focused on tier 1, and we're still getting that kind of massaged in, right? That's going to be critical in this piece, especially when we're still got our eye on the prize, keeping the main thing, but now layering in this other piece. It's the best of both worlds, you know, as we think about it.
Yeah, I think we're all still really building our understanding of what high quality virtual instruction can look and sound like. And what's important is that that's not at the expense of standards or high quality activities and materials in classrooms. And I think you see a great job of her filling gaps today in student understanding while still making progress toward grade level standards and curriculum, because it's within the context of that extension task from the guidebook. And I think in my work with teachers, I'll tell you this, nothing is more frustrating for a teacher than when they receive some feedback that's not aligned to the curriculum expectation. So if I went in there and I was like, oh, you should teach this instead and has nothing to do with the curriculum, or why don't you try this? And I can't because we're editing our extension task and that's where we are in the guidebook unit. Like, that's frustrating for teachers. So as leaders, we have to make sure that we're continually learning and aware of where teachers are within those curriculum expectations, so we can give strong content-centered feedback. So we're not in opposition for what they're hearing from other sources. And I think that's really important that we go into classrooms having some awareness, some context of where the teacher is in the unit of learning and building toward those standards, so we can give feedback within those expectations. And we can help give feedback that's going to allow them to fill those gaps for students that have unfinished learning. Because y'all, I'm having a moment. Give me a second.
We have many moments.
Our students are coming back to us with a set of unfinished learning.
That's
and
right.
We want to push and we want to be on standard. We want to teach that curriculum as intended, but we have to look for ways to fill those gaps for students on a daily basis, where we can give them just enough in that mini lesson to be able to access that lesson that's coming next. And I really appreciate how that was done in today's lesson.
Yeah,
as well.
And we all get a little, you know, we miss our kids, and it's a trying time. So us learning together today, shoulder to shoulder, means a lot to virtual shoulder to shoulder means a lot to Lindsay and me. And some good observations. As Tessie says, we know, Lindsay, we're feeling you and we feel the same way. I think we all are there in this space together. So thank you for that. So
I love Noelle's point too, Vicki, about we cannot replace tier 1 rigor just because something else is easier to adapt. So I might go in there and say, oh, this is not a tier 1 curriculum. That's not what we need to do. And that is not what we need to do. But I understand the context, and that this 10 minutes is going to allow students to be able to access that tier 1 curriculum lesson that's coming next. And I really appreciate that.
Good comments coming through too. Excellent comments. And so as we just kind of bring us back for a moment here to the leveraging of this, right? So we're reimagining right now together, and learning is so exciting. Lindsay and I, we laugh, we cry, we get goosebumps. So we do it all because we love you and we know this is passion for all of us. And we're reimagining what this experience can look like, right? And how to make it even richer and stronger based on our experiences in traditional and now in virtual as we move ourselves forward in this state. I think too, we've got to look at not only providing that strength-based support, but how are we going to utilize this whole process to do that in this space? And then, of course, moving into how does this impact our school and our district? So, Lindsay, let's go in a little deeper. So, strength-based coaching. Guys, our teachers are under stress right now, and we know that. We know that. We're all under stress. And turnover rates for already certified teachers are very high, 80% or higher. More than half of our teachers have left the profession, right? These are reasons why we need to focus on their strengths. Just calling, that heart here to ensure that teachers are being reinforced for the excellent work that they're doing, and us pulling that out, very important, so that that pressure is bearable, and so that our best educators stay with us and continue to grow. All of our educators stay with us and continue to grow, right? So as we think about that, it's going to be really important. So for us to continue to focus on that. So right now, Lindsay, talk a little bit about providing that strength-based support for teachers.
Absolutely. So I think that in a lot of cases, strengths-based conversations are something that we're also new to in a lot of ways, that we just don't have quite the same experience with coaching teachers really strictly in that strengths-based mindset that maybe we have in the experience for and other approaches. But when I think about a strengths-based conversation, I want to go into that conversation with the teacher, and my primary goal is just to talk about what went well. So that's different for a lot of teachers. It's not what they expect. It's often different for people who are just new to the profession because it's not what they got in other professional settings. And so it's important that when we go toward a teacher with this approach, that just like students in a virtual environment, that we're super clear in our communication with teachers, that we're very clear that this is different. And this is critical because the approach is going to be different. And I want to start those conversations by maybe talking to the teacher very specifically, saying, you know what? I want to talk to you today solely about the strengths of this lesson. This might feel a little uncomfortable because it is our instinct to want to fix things. Just kind of step it out for a minute. Y'all, my most reflective teachers always go straight to the negative. Like, I'm going to change this and this. No, stop. It's important for us to talk about strengths. So those are the people I got to hammer this home with really strongly. I know it's uncomfortable. You want to talk about what we're going to fix. But what I want you to do is I really want us to take a minute to really listen, reflect, and really hang in there. Really stick with this strengths piece, because we want to take a few moments to talk about what you're doing that's truly making a difference in student learning. So we're going to talk about how your teacher actions were powerful and how they contributed to student achievement positively. And then at the end of the conversation, we'll talk about maybe how you could take one of those strengths and leverage it, take it a step further to really push your students to the next level. And y'all, awareness is really important right now. I think teachers, they really need to be supported, and they need us to validate them in their work. And yes, we're validating validation, Michelle. I think that's really important. Everyone, no matter what, needs to be validated in the work sometimes. It's not all bad, but a lot of this is new. And so we need to be validated in the fact and that we are doing some things right, and we need to support and lift up our teachers to help them build on a strong foundation of what they're already able to provide to kids. And I just think it's important that we communicate that to teachers because it might be different, but I also think it's important that we tag and label those things for teachers and build that awareness, because y'all, and some of y'all have already messaged me, it's hard to manage the tech stuff and the teaching stuff, and my vocabulary is bad, in the same cognitive load and be reflective as a teacher all at the same time. So I'm teaching kids, I'm running technology issues, and I'm trying to note what's working and what's not. That's a lot of cognitive load. So I think right now, where it's still new to us, teachers need us even more to be helping them know and understand what's working for students at this moment, since it's so new. So Vicki, tell me a little bit more about where I can find some support for providing feedback to teachers in this virtual space.
Yeah, so as we think about it, guys, we have this tool that'll help us, as we kind of acclimate ourselves, right, to this new space. And it can be used for planning, but it can also be used for reflection. And so whenever I'm going on learning walks, I have this with me, and they're virtual. I'm popping around here and there. I have this document with me because it does help me. And it does take us just a minute to kind of like get into the space, because we're used to what we normally would see in brick and mortar in that traditional setting. So as supporters, as coaches, we have to have a good kind of understanding ourselves, which is the purpose for these virtual learning walks. So as you look at this, you probably are noticing some things that in Shasta's lesson that kind of fell out here, right? So take a little moment to look and think yourself about some things maybe you noted in the lesson that Shasta was doing that really relates to this virtual learning strategy piece on our companion tool. And what Lindsay and I are going to do, as you're kind of taking a look at that, is we're going to kind of do some debriefing. Lindsay, tell me if I'm at the wrong bus stop. Some debriefing around what we noticed in that lesson, because this would take place as we're reflecting, preparing to give that teacher a little bit of support through the feedback, right? So I'm going to check the text box, Lindsay, before we jump in. Some people talking about surviving and thriving. Absolutely, we're gonna survive this, and we're gonna thrive, and we're gonna be even more resilient, like we always are as a state. Yes, absolutely. So as folks are putting their thinking caps on and they're really looking at that tool a little bit, Lindsay, why don't we go ahead for Tom's sake and begin to model through this next piece, and maybe you guys might take a note or two. If you hear something that resonates, maybe that you thought about. Lindsay, take us away first to talk about this.
Absolutely. So we're going to go back to those 3 parts of the learning walk process briefly. So like I said, when I'm in a lesson, I'm jotting those immediate strengths. We've talked about a lot of those: the questioning, the engagement, the level of thinking that students were engaging in, the use of the mentor text as a model, the academic feedback, the checks for understanding. Like, we've really gone through a lot of that together. And so you guys can see that we can identify strengths immediately in that lesson setting, just like you guys did today. And so what we really want to start talking about is, after that visit, when we're focused on student learning and we're trying to think about that reflective conversation that we're going to have collectively between Vicki and I, and then that we're going to have with the teacher as well. And so we always start with that piece, right? So we want to determine the strengths like we talked about, but then we also want to begin to think about how we might be able to leverage those strengths moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So Lindsay, as we come out of this lesson, I know, that we're kind of talking about the strengths that we notice first as we debrief, so that we can share that with Shasta. So what were some things that really struck you, some strengths that you noticed that help kids?
Yeah, some strengths that I think really came to the surface in this learning walk was, one, that quality use of academic feedback, the way that she was able to adjust the instruction in that shared writing piece when the students weren't getting it, when they weren't meeting the criteria for the objective, when they weren't able to answer successfully. She was able to take that level of question and back it down and build students back up toward mastery, to where she felt comfortable and confident that they understood what she was putting in place for them. But I think too that goes hand in hand with how well the activities were aligned to the outcome for the lesson, to the standard, to the guidebook expectations. This was clearly very purposefully planned for, and everything aligned really well. Additionally, just kind of as an aside note, I really think it was important how she involved students in interacting with the lesson in a variety of ways virtually. So they had some open mic discussion where she just asked them some questions. but she also used some hand signals to make sure that they were with her and that they were engaged in the lesson. And then that use of the chat box at the end to make sure that things came full circle and students understood how they were supposed to designate new speakers when they were writing. So I think that was really
cool. It was real obvious. And I even noticed some of our friends who were with us virtually and in the chat box, they noticed those pieces as well. Those checks for understanding, as she was going through, really did stop this from being a train wreck. And some people noticed if they'd have been released at that point, it would have been terrible because the kids didn't understand yet. They hadn't got that understanding. So she knew, and somebody even noted that she was a Johnny on the spot kind of a situation where she was anticipating or thinking about that. So it was clear, as you said, that she's done a lot of planning around this piece and was anticipating those things. So that, agree with you. Under standards and objectives, just thinking about that, that's clearly, or academic feedback for sure, checking for understanding, salvaged the student experience there because she was ready and they were progressing towards mastery of that little mini lesson, Lindsay. So
yeah, I think, go ahead.
No.
I'm getting ahead of you. As I think about really the strengths of this lesson, I think that holistically they lie in that standards and objectives indicator, the way she's able to communicate the objective with all the aligned activities, with the way that expectations are being clarified through the model and through the feedback that she's given, and then the way she's checking for understanding frequently throughout the course of the lesson. So you've got that constant check for understanding going on there as well. I do think, though, when we begin to look at the tool, and I'll begin to look at what some virtual learning strategies and standards and objectives look like, I think that while we're modeling expectations and we're clarifying those through a set of questions, I don't know that there's a real communication of the criteria for the student work. Specifically, I think the teacher knows what she expects of student work. I think that's clear in the exemplar that we see and in the shared writing. I don't think that's the problem, but I do think that's strategically and intentionally labeling that criteria during both models, as well as maybe having a visual of that criteria during both of those asynchronous model opportunities and also with their asynchronous tasks, could really help kids be able to self-assess more intentionally and more strategically. They are self-assessing a little. They're evaluating her writing, but I think their ability to self-assess would really be strengthened with a visual tool of that criteria.
So it's almost like, Lindsay, the strength is there, right? It's the checking for understanding, her knowledge of that, to what to look for. She clearly has the criteria in her head because she's able to respond quickly, but you're thinking about maybe taking that strength and enhancing it just a hair more by having that criteria available more readily for students. So in that portion of the lesson or in the asynchronous portion, specifically, I hear you saying is that's extended because they're going to do that now on their own. That would ensure that the kids would be able to go that little distance in case some perhaps didn't get it. So that signposting of that or bringing it out in some kind of way is just a logical next step for Shasta. And it's not a big giant jump, but it'll make a big giant leap in student growth and achievement for those little ones maybe that didn't have that, or it would have gotten that understanding at a maybe uptake a little faster. I think
too, Vicki, it's even more important in this virtual space. Success criteria is always important, but in the virtual space, when they're going to go and do the revision of the writing asynchronously and the teacher's not there, I think about being in the classroom, and when students get started on their independent work, we're walking around the classroom and we're checking the work and making sure they get it from the moment they start. And I don't have that opportunity when they're doing it asynchronously. I have to wait until they're done to give that redirecting feedback. And so I need to be even more clear in the criteria. And I need to give kids even more of an opportunity to self-assess as they work, because I can't assess them as they work. And so I think it's even more powerful in this space, and it would be a really good next step for Ms. Looper holistically.
And it's not a huge jump, it's a tweaklet. And when it's not like a chiclet, it's little, but it's going to make a big, huge difference. And as Michelle Lewis and I have had a conversation online as we've been going through, and she was in another one of our sessions with another teacher, May, a high school teacher, where that same kind of idea comes through, that you've got to be redundant and you've got to make sure that you're just super, super clear in providing those signposts, to make sure that kids are understanding those concepts as they move into their own time and their own space with their learning. It's a critical piece. Excellent.
Absolutely, Vicki. I agree completely. And as we kind of shift gears, I love the idea of taking something that the teacher is really excelling at, in this case, standards and objectives. And let's just think about how we can elevate that practice as we move forward. It's as simple as putting it on the screen, right? You know what the criteria is. We're going to help you put it on the screen and really bring it to the next level, because that's what's best for kids in this particular space. I'm going to say this. Sometimes when we get through this process, what we begin to see is a need to define some learning for more than one teacher. So as we shift into the third really purpose for learning walks that we're going to dig into today, we're going to talk briefly about how we might use this same opportunity, this same learning walk in this same environment with Ms. Looper to tag some new learning that we might need school-wide. Could be school-wide in terms of our teachers, but it also could be school-wide in terms of our leaders. Because we know
I'm sorry, I just had to say, I love that idea, because you're thinking not only about this individual teacher, but if you picked up on a trend, right? If you picked up on a trend that you're noticing in multiple classrooms, then that support can be for multiple teachers, which I love that idea. Big bang for the buck.
That's exactly right. Because remember, the learning walk is not about doing the walk. It's about learning from the walk. So what did we get from this that told us more about maybe what a teacher is doing that we could transfer to multiple teachers in our building? Or what's something that we're learning from the learning walk that we all need to know more about? And so that shift in language is really huge. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that third step of the learning walks process, the group reflective conversation to identify trends and next steps. We want to make sure that we're not only providing feedback to the teacher, but we're sitting as a team and thinking about what does this mean for our school as a whole? Because I'm going to say this, support, there are many, many layers of support. And this is really powerful because in this process, we're going to define support in three ways. That individual teacher support that we're definitely going to provide to Ms. Looper. But sometimes what we see is a need to also provide some support in groups, whether that's a PLC group or a cluster group, a content area group, a grade level group. There may be some group support that's needed. And then sometimes, y'all, the support is that the leadership team needs some more learning. We see the need, but we don't know how to fix it. So we have to stop and say, what do we need to learn more about as a team so that we can fix a breakdown that may be larger than we thought? So these are just a couple of questions that you could think about in terms of defining some new learning after a learning walks visit, really thinking about what the evidence reveals about school-wide trends around instruction holistically and what new learning for the leadership team might need to be. I'm going to kind of give you a brief sort of synopsis of what's happening in Ms. Looper's school in this moment with her leaders. So basically, success criteria was something that they had been working on, and then they went to virtual. And instead, they were really working on closing some gaps in student understanding because they knew they had that, and they were exacerbating them with kids not being in the school. And so Ms. Looper's doing a great job of bringing that cluster learning to her virtual classroom by having that mini lesson to fill that gap. But what got lost was the success criteria. So that's something they've been kind of trying to work on in the school, because you can tell she knows what the expectations, but it didn't transfer to the virtual environment. But y'all, it didn't transfer to anybody's virtual environment. They're not really seeing it holistically across multiple classrooms. And so the leadership team has had to stop and think, it's not just one teacher that's lacking some clarity in this space, it's all of them. So it might be a need for some bigger learning that maybe they don't really know and understand how to label and communicate success criteria in a virtual platform. And so as the leadership team got together, they weren't real sure how to do it either. Because, you know, their teacher leaders, their mentor teachers, they're teaching every day. They're not doing it either. That's what we saw. Nobody was doing it. So we had to stop and say, we need to, as a team, learn some more about what this is going to look and sound like as well. And so this is what that might look like. So support can happen in these various layers. And so the leadership team in this school decided that, you know what, the learning starts with us. If it's something that's not transferring in almost every classroom, we probably have a need ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so what the leadership team did is they used this opportunity to decide that, you know what, we need to deepen our understanding of how to communicate and share success criteria through these virtual platform spaces. And specifically, they're going to do that. They're going to go out, they're going to get some learning about it, but they're going to have those teacher leaders try it out. So in your lesson tomorrow, you like fumble around with it and try to see what works for you. And we're going to watch, or we're going to record that Zoom lesson and watch it as whatever. But we're going to try those things out and learn about it as a team, so that then we can take it to that bigger group learning, to that cluster or that PLC group. And we can take all those techniques that worked well for our teacher leaders, and we can segment them and teach them how to engage students in those pieces over time, so that we're building teacher knowledge and understanding, but we're also allowing those teacher leaders to take ownership of bringing that learning to their peers, even on a Zoom platform. It works just the same, right? So, and then we're going to be able to be even more strategic and intentional about that individual teacher coaching opportunity that we have, because we've clarified expectations for this need at the leadership team level, at the PLC or cluster level, and now the teacher knows exactly what's expected and how, and we can coach in that space.
So Lindsay, it becomes more than Velcro teaching. It becomes something, and learning, it becomes something that sticks and is more cohesive. And you know, I love the way that as you were kind of debriefing it, that whole process that we go through with the team that went on the learning walk, because we remember it's about our learning, started with the teacher, but then we built up and said, so what are the implications if this is across the board? We saw it in multiple classrooms that we visited, right? And so now we're saying, what are the implications for PLC or for cluster? What does that mean that we need to do for teachers? And then we take it one step further and we say, so what does that mean for our instructional leadership team? What are the implications for that? And we come up with what our new learning is and what our next steps are. And then for our district loves on the line, we love our district leaders. It's a next step out that we don't show on the chart, but we can certainly visualize it, is that, so what are the implications for us as district now? We've seen that there's a gap. How do we help fill the gap at the ILT level for our school leaders? At the cluster level, it'll filter in, and then to the classroom level to the students. Beautiful, just beautiful process. I told y'all it was going to be good. Love it. All right. So Lindsay, here it's kind of that shift, that idea that we're talking about. We're reimagining and we're moving forward in our thought process here of how we can leverage this and reimagine something we're already doing that now is going to take on another layer. You know, guys, that's what I love. It's like you buy a pair of blue jeans and you can use them, you can recycle them, roll up the cuff, and now they're capris. So you're taking something you already have, which is what I've done, and you're making.
I'm cutting them off, Vicki. They're being short.
But our capris, like my friend Teddy Broussard says. So you're really moving them into a space that's deeper and more purposeful and more relevant in the time and place that you're in. So let's reflect, you know, because it's like when I said this wrong on the other day, I'm going to try to say it right. When I hear, I forget. When I see, I remember. When I do, I understand. But when I reflect, I learn. And so let's take a moment and connect some dots. Think about something you're taking away so far from this session, something, a key nugget. Just give us a little nugget of something you're going to take away. Maybe jot it in the chat box, because Lindsay and I would love to hear your thoughts on something maybe that inspired you, or that you're putting in your brain and training that brain, saying, I'm going to do this. This is something I learned today. I'm going to give you just a moment to reflect before we move on. Strength-based coaching. Love it. Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. Verbal praise, strengthen their success. Love it. My beautiful friend Noelle saying loves the idea of the mini field testing. It is kind of going in and trying a little piece and plugging it in. Yes, by the ELT of ideas. Good catch. Yes. Folks are saying the idea of the strength-based coaching, ensuring that they're effective strategies, right, with these tools like we have with our companion document. Danielle is seeing that as something that could very, very much help them. Virtual support, how it looks different, right? But it's still learning and teaching. Working with teacher leaders to help us grow in PLC, absolutely. And we have some free materials and resources around that on our blog and different things, guys, just right there for you. Access at NIT.org. We're putting out a lot, Dr. McQueen's putting out a lot of different things for us. Clear objectives, the idea of that redundancy and making sure super clear, and those criteria, that becomes even more important, folks are saying. Checks for understanding for you release to asynchronous. I also, take away every time Lindsay tries to school this old brain of the importance of looking at that content and making sure I'm on point as a leader going in. I want to make sure I know what I'm looking for when I go in, especially here in Louisiana, to make sure that we're staying with the great learning and teaching that's already happening. And some folks are saying, I didn't realize that teacher retention was so tricky. It is. It's such a hard time to keep us as teachers because the work is hard. And now it's shifting a little bit, and it's even going to be harder for a lot of us. But
I love that point too about the curriculum, Vicki, because I found when I talk to teachers that one way to deepen teachers' understanding of the nuances of the curriculum and have them really understand the layers of it is to provide that feedback through the curriculum. Like when they see you using the curriculum as well to drive that feedback, then it helps them know and understand the curriculum at a deeper level. And that's really important right now because so often the curriculum is delivered at that surface level, but there's a lot more to it. And so when we're grounding our feedback in the curriculum, it helps elevate teachers' understanding of that as well.
And Lindsay, I wanted to put it, Lindsay and I both have chatted out our email address. You can reach out to us. You can find us on the website. The picture ain't too great of me. I don't know. It looks too much like me. That's the problem. But you can find us on the website. And then if you want to email us for some resources or some questions, we'd love to answer in any way that we can. Here's your call.
Yes, Jesse, my understanding is that it is on the YouTube playlist as well.
It is, and you can see us and laugh all over again at the Capris. Yeah, and certainly we want you to have some good next steps. Lindsay, can you bring up that one slide right quick in the last few minutes? And if you guys have any questions, just shoot them to us right now, or you can shoot them to us after. Lindsay's going to be watching that, but I just wanted to point out some next possible steps that you might want to think about could be to implement a process for ongoing learning walks for your school. Those virtual pieces, just go ahead. It doesn't have to be all, but it could be some of your teachers, that you'll pop into and watch for with other leaders. Assist with the development of a system for effective organization of the learning walk data in order to make some strong instructional decisions, as always, whether you're the district or school level. Excellent. And then engage in those learning. They are so much fun. I love it every time I go in. It makes my heart just sing to see what's happening in our virtual classrooms across the state and the country, but really get involved in those with school leaders, district leaders, whomever. Lindsay, do we have any questions that are coming across in the chat?
Not at the moment, but we'll secure another minute or two. You guys are welcome to post some additional questions. We appreciate it. And we love being with you guys today and seeing our friends.
Yeah, and NIT will be having our own virtual kind of NSI. If you guys are interested, check our website, our National Summer Institute. And I see that our lovely, beautiful Sharon is coming online. I see your beautiful face now. So that's an indication that Vicki, Lindsay, your time is about up. Sharon. We thank y'all today, and we thank Sharon. She's been a godsend, and everyone at DOE for the opportunity.
I want to thank you guys. This was a great session. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot by being able to participate. And you guys have gotten great comments in the chat box, so I know the other people really appreciated the information too.
Thank you so much. You're a blessing.
I want to remind everybody to complete their session evaluation and provide feedback in the Schedule app. And the handouts for this session are on the Sketch app, and they are on the teacher leader information page where you can get the information from. If you have any trouble with that, just let me know. I'll put my email in the chat box in case anybody has any trouble like accessing any of that, any of the info from this session. Okay? I want to thank everybody for your participation, and have a great afternoon and stay dry this weekend.
Oh, praying for that too, Sharon. Y'all have a blessed weekend, everyone.
You too. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.